John Keim covers the Commanders for ESPN.com. John, I don't know how many pressers you've been to over the years. What'd you make of Ron's mood yesterday?
Well, first of all, the next Jersey Shore is going to be epic because with DeVito. It was, I think it was almost like the reality sets in, right? So last week I felt like, losing to Seattle in the last second like that was a massive gut punch, and you could just see it, right? And, just the way they lost but with the last second kick and just the deflation of that and, pretty good offensive game, et cetera. Yesterday, though, it felt like the reality was there because, if you lose that game last week, but if you beat the Giants, hey, you know what, you can convince yourself to go down and beat Dallas. Now you're right back in it, blah, blah, blah. But I think yesterday was, it certainly felt like it's just not going where they hoped it would go, period. And I think there was just a realization to that.
I mean, do the defensive leaders look around and say, like, we let Tommy DeVito, a third stringer, come in here and just slice and dice us? And I know they sacked him 9 times and they brought pressure at least early in the game, but like when you let a third stringer do that to you, that has to make a crisis of confidence for the defense, I would think, going forward.
I think that crisis of confidence should be there for a long time because they've been doing this all year. Right. And if you blow coverages, whether it's Tommy DeVito or whomever, they're going to find an open guy. It's not that hard. So it's not just what he did, but it is part of what he did. Some of those big plays are just their blown coverages, and that's happened all year. So, I think I think you have to realize that you just got beaten by a guy who has not done anything in the NFL and was, they didn't even know what round he was picked in, et cetera. But again, I think the attitude is always like, this guy's in the NFL for a reason. And when you leave guys wide open, that's what happens. Now, there are other times where, the kid made plays. And the one thing he can do is he is quick, he's fast, and it can extend plays. But sometimes it's just a matter of like the first third down, guys have to sink to their proper depth, understand where, the first down markers are and worry about that versus like a tight end underneath who would have to gain 10 yards after the catch to get that first down. Those are little things that you saw in the game where it's like, play to your depth, et cetera. So if you leave guys a little bit open, he's going to find them, and he did. So, whether or not it leads to a crisis of confidence, it's just a reminder that the details have never been there for the defense this year.
Well, are most of the issues in the passing game, are they when they're playing zone and they're passing guys off and then that's when the guys are seemingly wide open more often than not? Or is that a misperception?
Wasn't one the pick play? It was one was a pick and Fuller couldn't get over.
Yeah.
But one also sometimes on those two is they do have exchanges. So if they motion to a bunch or they motion to a stack, and we saw this with these guys when they played Philly, they hurt the Eagles in the same way where you motion to a stack or a bunch, and then it changes how the coverage might go.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's part of it too, and the communication then becomes huge. And that hasn't been there this year. The coverages have been messed up for whatever reason, and is it just about coaching? I don't think you can just. Listen, everything's part of it. It has to be part of it, but then it's on-field communication and who's, how are you doing that, and why is it always getting messed up? It can't just be as simple as they didn't see this, but because you're testing, their ability to communicate. That's why you motion to those situations, and they've shown all year that they don't do that well. So that, that's part of it. It can change in man. It can change in the zone. And the zone match is it's a little bit, I don't know about, Benjamin St. Juste was saying that it's, they play a more complex scheme, and sometimes it'd be easier just to stick with your guy. But, he even said, we've seen this work because it did work last year. At the end of the second half of the year, they were really good at it, and now they're not. And it's baffling because it's largely the same group. Not all completely. I think you also need somebody back there who's a very, very strong communicator. And I don't know that they have that guy back there. And so I think that's part of it. But I think you have to pin it on everything. I mean, it hasn't worked. When it doesn't work, it's everybody. And you can look at scheme, you can look at coaches, and then you can look at why aren't the players executing the way they should?
You know, nobody really cares about positives after a game like that, but they did get to him, the quarterback, right, 9 times, you know, after having traded Chase and Montez. That's somewhat of a bright spot. And KJ Henry, who did nothing in the preseason, he's kind of flashing when given an opportunity. Yeah,
he has. And, you know, even late in the preseason, he's not the flashy type.
Right.
You know, he's going to be he was a little bit more, I say run stopper, but that's, you know, Andre Jones is the guy who's going to flash more. He's got that skill, right? But, you know, that's a few games now because he had the good rush against Seattle as well, which on the bogus penalty. So that's a good sign for them moving forward. And part because they don't have any defensive end signed for next year. So That's a good sign. So I think, listen, we all know where the season is at. That's what the season becomes. Who can be not just a part of the future, but can help in the future, because they need to find those guys, especially at that position. And is he just a projected backup, which is okay because you need rotational guys. And I think you're still going to go out and look for some of those guys who can be legitimate starters. But can they, you know, what kind of role can they play in the future? And so, like I said, that's what the rest of the season has become.
John, back in April, I scratched my head, like I think a lot of people that follow this team did, when they selected guys that played in the secondary in the first and second round of the NFL draft. I was like, you know what? Probably would have used at least one of those picks on an offensive lineman. But if you look at the stats now through 11 games, this defense, this secondary is allowing nearly 260 passing yards per game. So, I mean, the new guys haven't really helped with that, but now I understand why they did it, because they knew that was a glaring need.
Well, I don't think they viewed it as the glaring need. I don't know that was necessarily the reason. That's the hard part with all this. That I think a lot of it with Forbes, it was they certainly knew that corner was a need, right? So that was part of it, but also his ability to, you know, you have Kendall Fuller in the last year. You need 3 good corners every week, and he was a guy who made plays. So that was a big part of it as well. So it wasn't just that it was a glaring need; it was that they could help in an area like Quan Martin. That's the one that you can. I still think I think that kid can play. I just think when you look at it, certainly in hindsight, when you see what hasn't happened on the line and how hasn't been used on defense, then it became a luxury pick for a team that had some glaring. And I don't just draft for need, but there were guys that were available that you could have said, okay, you could do this and be just as fine in a spot where it can help you more now and in the future. But, I think with Quan Martin, the thought was, he can play in the slot and he can play safety. He gives you that versatility, which they wanted in this system, and it allows you to play disguised coverages better. And that's one thing this team hasn't been good at, is disguising coverages. And they were good at that in the past. And so, so I don't know that it was just a glaring need situation as much as they thought it would enhance them. But it turns out, it's just been bad. You see that. And I think now it has become a glaring need that you need to get a guy back there who can be as much a leader/director as anything, too.
John, let's talk about how Sam had 3 good games in a row. And I know I had been saying, I think most of us thought conventional wisdom is, just keep stacking good games. That's what this year is about. So, yesterday step backwards. It's not a straight linear progression, right? So, it's what happens. To me, it looked like he was just kind of pressing a bit, as the game was coming down on the crunch. He kind of was forcing some things.
Yeah, and I think there were some hurried throws, too, and you saw that in the red zone a little bit. And there was and I think the one thing the Giants did pretty well is in that first game, they used a lot of 5-man pressures. I was just looking at this. I think he had 22 sacks in the first game against 5-man pressures, only 10 this time. And so I think the Giants did a good job of maybe of throwing a little bit of a wrench. Now, I didn't know they would one, but I just wonder how that affects timing and and everything with that, right? And but yeah, no, he definitely. The Giants play well against them, and sometimes you see like receivers have to win their routes better, and but like on the first throw to Diami, it's not a good ball, and so there was the throw to Logan in the red zone that. It's a little bit of a tight window, but just off to the inside. And if you throw it, I'm sure like Logan was ready for that. So you just wonder about the timing on the throw, but just also the placement. That's where it was off. And so, yeah, it was not a good game for him overall. But I think this is all part of the, I'm with you. Like when you're looking at the young quarterbacks, you have to give it a lot of time because there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's like this stretch will tell us not just a lot about him, but about the entire offense in general, because now you have Dallas. And so, again, the rest of the season really is about like who can be part of the future and to what degree. And same thing with him. Now you've got Dallas, like, can the line give him a little bit of time? Now, I think we all know that the line's going to need more help. Uh-huh. But how does he handle that pressure, and how does it affect his game? There will be things like you can tell from that. It doesn't mean it's if he goes out and has a great game, it's going to be really good for them. But if he doesn't, it's not just because of him, right? So you always have to place things in context. But I think the thing with him is always have a bad game. He always seems to recover, and that's a strength of his. And I think, you wonder for him, is that kind of, you look around the league and there are a lot of quarterbacks that are like that. You're going to have just a bad game. And he's thrown 12 picks this year, 7 are in 2 games.
Right.
So, that's how do you respond? But there's so much more to learn about him. A lot of things have been good and a lot of things have trended well. And we all, like I said, we all know that the line has to be strengthened.
Yes, to your point, they faced the Cowboys, and Micah Parsons is coming off a 2.5 sack game against the Carolina Panthers. He had 1.5 sacks the week before that against the Eagles, so he's got 4 sacks in his last 2 games. Now, this is just speculation, but I want John Keim's opinion. You said you were still learning a lot about Sam Howell. I don't think there's much to learn about Ron Rivera anymore, and the fan base is over Ron Rivera. They've been for a long time. Total speculation, but let's say they get blasted on Thursday. You've been through this before. You've seen coaches fired in the midseason. What do you think the possibility is, the likelihood of that happening after the next game? Because it doesn't look like it's happening after this one.
No, it's not happening after this one. And, it's a hard question to answer because we know from the beginning they wanted to give the staff the whole year to fully judge them under their own merits without, being under the Snyder regime, because that can be a difficult place to coach, as we saw for 2 decades. Right?
Sure, an albatross.
It wasn't just this time; it was every time. And but I get it; they haven't progressed. And if you go out and, I think it just depends. Like, what kind of game is it? Do you lose by 30? Is it the Christmas situation from a couple of years ago where you lose by a ton? I know there was a lot of other reasons for that, but still, like, how does it look? I think that's where I say, like, if you go out there and it's like a competitive game, you lose late and blah, 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 then I don't know that you do that. If it's just an absolute skunking, I think I can't say nothing would happen because I don't know that for 100% sure. I don't know where they would turn if they did something like that, and then it becomes a situation where, if you're Ron Rivera, do you know what's going on? Do you just say, like, if you got to do something, do it now? I don't know, but I think we all know where this is going at this point, and it would happen at some point, especially if you lose. But I don't know. Like, the hard part is, in this situation, like, who then takes over? And that's the other part of the equation. Would you rather just, like, you want to fully assess all aspects? Is it easier with him in charge, or not? Or do you get to the point with the players where it's like they're just done and you need something else now to get you through, just a different voice. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot to consider, but I would, again, the initial thing for me all year had been that they would get the year, but I don't think they expected it to unfold like this. And so if you get skunked on national TV again, then I just, I couldn't.
John, don't you think the assessment is over?
Sometimes you got to pull the plug. It's a mercy killing.
Like they may not pull the plug on it, but I think Harris has already decided.
No, they already know, but let them keep losing because it only helps them long term, right? Let them keep losing.
And I think the other part, I know early in the year it wasn't going to happen because you couldn't come in and, let it be known that, hey, we're going to give them the year and then pull the plug, because then it looks bad for, in the eyes of other prospective coaches and their agents. Because I talked to people about that early in the year, like how would it come across to you if they did this early? And it just wouldn't be a good look because, you want to make sure that what an owner tells you is going to be how it plays out. At this point, when it becomes obvious, if and when it becomes obvious, then I think you're entering a different situation, and it could just be to say, okay, we know this is going to happen. Let's just do it. I can't dismiss anything at this point because I don't know for sure. And I'm not, I don't know that it would happen. I don't know that it wouldn't happen. Because I think, again, at this point, if it becomes obvious, and it's obvious in the eyes of everybody, and it's obvious in the eyes of the coach, is it as much for the organization as it is to, so that person doesn't have to go through the final month in a situation like this, right? And just like you're going to do it, and then just do it. I don't, eventually it's going to happen because where they're at right now, unless there's some dramatic turnaround, it's going to happen. So there's a pro and a con to it because again, then the other question is who takes over, and if you're really trying to evaluate Sam Howell, then do you keep it? Do you keep the offensive staff in place in their current roles to better?
I think the fan base would want Bieniemy to be the interim, and he would still call plays, so it really wouldn't affect the offense that much.
Oh, it definitely would affect the offense because now you're
in their eyes.
Situation.
I get it.
Doesn't matter. Right. No, I get it, but it's about in the owner's eyes, not the fans. Yep. So I think that's the thing I would say is it does affect how things go because now you're putting a guy in charge who hasn't been in charge, who is still learning to be a play caller based on everything you hear, right, and see.
John, we got to run.
Okay. All right, guys.
All right, John Keim covers the Commanders for ESPN.com. A lot to get into, but next we'll move on from the talk about the coach to the quarterback in particular. I put it up as the Junkies poll of the day, brought to you by Van Meter Homes. A lot of people have declared Sam Howell the guy. He's going to be the guy moving forward. Are you still convinced after that game?